Hey guys, this video is for intro to hypothesis testing in case you missed it. So you need to copy down all of this into your notes. Intro to hypothesis testing. Hypothesis testing is our last unit we're going to do. So basically, in a hypothesis test, what's going to happen is that there's going to be something that you already know is true. And then you're going to be given new information, and you want to see whether that new information changes the fact that you already know is true or not. Whether or not that new information changes your already true statement will depend on the amount of evidence you've gathered to support that statement. So, one of the best ways to think about it is it's like a trial. So, a person robs a bank and they come into the trial. Well, they're accused of robbing a bank. They come into the trial. We assume they're innocent. And then the prosecution has to try to convince people that they're guilty, right? So they compile all this evidence, and then in the end, the jury makes the decision. Either the person is considered innocent or they're considered guilty, and that's the end. So hypothesis testing is a lot like that. You're assumed to be innocent, then we provide all this evidence, and then we decide whether or not we still think you're innocent or whether we changed our mind and think you're guilty. So when you're making a hypothesis, make sure the hypothesis is always about the whole population, okay? So see right here, bullet point number 2, your hypothesis should always be about the whole population. You shouldn't make a hypothesis about the sample, because why would you make a hypothesis about something you already know? Let's say I took a sample of 20 students and I found the average time they spend on homework is 2 hours. So that's not a hypothesis, that's just a fact, right? Your hypothesis should be, I hypothesize that out of all students, they spend 2 hours on their homework, okay? So the null hypothesis is HO. It's the status quo, it's the way things currently are. So this hypothesis is often referred to as the no difference or no change hypothesis. This would be, in fact, that the person is innocent. What we knew was true is all along, because we always assume that they're innocent until they're proven guilty. Okay, it's the status quo of what's happening right now. So for example, right now, even though we're in quarantine, we still have 7 periods per day. Next year, we might go to 6 periods per day. That's HA. So HO is what's currently happening, and what's currently known to already be true. According to you guys' test scores, 16% of students were proficient in math at RHS, okay? HA is the alternative hypothesis. It's what we're actually trying to prove is true. So, for example, there's a hypothesis that we will go back to 6 periods a day next year. Do we know for sure whether we're going to go to 6 or 7? We don't. But this is a hypothesis. It's, we think that's what might happen. So also, somebody might hypothesize that less than 16% of students will be proficient in math next year. Why? Well, we're in quarantine right now. I'm sure that the younger students aren't learning the level of math that they would be learning if we were actually in the classroom, right? So you might hypothesize that the next class that takes the SBAC will have lower scores than you guys did. Okay, and then the other thing is the person is guilty. All right, so we're going to look at a couple examples. The first example, it says a recent survey shows high school students use their phone on average 3.4 hours per day. An SRS of 50 RHS students shows an average of 3.6 hours per day. Is there evidence of a difference? Okay, so one thing you need to know is, first of all, this is an X bar / mean problem because it's talking about the average. So I want to remind you the difference between these two things. Mu is the population mean, meaning the average of everyone in the whole population, whereas X bar is the sample mean, the average of your sample of students. So the population in this problem is represented by all high school students in the whole world. So what's my population mean? That's 3.4. The sample mean was 3.6 because that mean is based only on the sample of 50 students. So just make sure that when you write your sentences, they're always about the population mean, which is mu. So it should be about the 3.4. Now I've written you guys several ways to write HO and HA, well really 2. You can choose whichever way is better for you. Some make more sense to some people than others. Okay, so the average phone use is still 3.4 hours a day. So your HO is always that there's no difference or no change. So you would say that even though the sample showed a higher mean than the actual population, it's not high enough to say there's a significant difference. So we're going to say that the average phone use is still 3.4 hours a day. There's not enough evidence to show that it's changed. Another way you could say it is that there's no evidence of a difference. We haven't provided enough evidence to show that this number is high enough to say that there's a real change. So for this one, the average phone use is still 3.4 hours per day. The HA that would go with that is basically the opposite sentence. So the average phone use is not 3.4 hours a day, or is different than 3.4 hours a day. Or you could say the average phone use has changed. Any of those are fine. Okay, the opposite sentence, the converse that goes with this one, is there's no evidence of a difference. Whereas this says there is evidence of a difference. So there is evidence of a difference, and you should have said technically like in phone use, in average phone use per day. Okay, so we're only going to look at one last example. So the last example that we're going to look at, this is number 2 from the worksheet. So it says Lena is a college basketball player, makes 75% of her free throws that she attempted in her career. She decided to try a new technique for shooting her free throws. She's curious if the new technique produced significantly better or worse results. She tried it and made 70%. Okay, so basically she's testing a new technique, and what she's testing it for is she wants to know if her results are better or worse. She doesn't say like, oh, I just want to know if my results are better. And she doesn't say, oh, I just want to know if my results are worse. So if you think of better as like greater than, like better, greater than. And if you think of worse as like less than, like she did worse. And you think of both, like it could go either way as not equal to, okay? So in this case, this problem is asking if it's better or worse. So your statement for HA should include like a statement of inequality. So you don't want to say, oh, like the new technique is better or the new technique is worse. You just want to say the new technique has changed the outcome, because you're not knowing which direction it would go in. Okay, so for HO, it's always going to be that there's no change. Lana still makes 75% of her free throws. That's one way you could say it. The other way you could say it is the new technique did not change her results. Something along those lines. There's many different ways you could say it, okay? So when you're writing HA, you just can't say, it's some people always want to say like, oh, the new technique made her results go down, because obviously 70 is less than 75%, but you cannot say that. The reason you cannot say that is because you're hypothesizing this, you're making these statements before you found out this information. Like she made these hypotheses before she tried the new technique. So she didn't know that she was only going to make 70%. So that's where you have to really read the statement and see whether the statement's saying better, worse, or both. And in this case, it's saying both. So Lana makes more or less than 75% of her shots. You could also say Lena no longer makes 75% of her shots, or the new technique has changed her results, which goes with this one. So there's several different ways to say it. If you guys have any questions, please come to tutoring. It's going to be 3 p.m. today and tomorrow, or you can go ahead and send me a text on Remind. All you have to do for these problems is just give the hypotheses. We're going to get into the actual math and procedures behind that probably in a couple of days, maybe next week, okay? We haven't gotten that far yet. Hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for watching.